There are moments in human history when the universe does not whisper, it roars. Moments when the impossible, the untouchable, the sacred limits of physics do not bend slowly, they snap. For more than 100 years, the speed of light was humanity's greatest stage. A perfect, immovable rule. A cosmic rule written into the architecture of reality itself. Nothing with mass could reach 299,792,458 meters per second. Nothing could outrun a photon. Nothing could cross that final boundary separating what we dreamed from what the universe allowed. And yet, on a quiet, unremarkable Tuesday morning, inside a NASA laboratory humming under cold fluorescent lights, that boundary ceased to exist. Not with thunder, not with explosions, but with a blinking line of data on a monitor, a whisper that would know the destiny of an entire species. At first, scientists refused to believe it. These were people shaped by Einstein's equations. People who treated the speed of light with the same reverence a monk gives to school. Their entire reality was built upon the certainty that this limit was permanent, absolute, undefeatable. But then came the second meeting, the third, the 15th. And slowly, all replaced denial. Because what they saw was not a ship speeding up, not an engine firing, not a thruster pushing. It was something far stranger. Space movement, a distortion, a curvature, a fold in the fabric of space-time itself. A region of space compressed ahead, stretched behind sliding like a geometric wave, carrying an object that, from its own perspective, never moved at all. A warp bubble. Humanity did not accelerate. Humanity surfaced. The experiment was tiny. A cylinder no larger than a refrigerator, suspended in a magnetic cradle, surrounded by sensors so sensitive they could detect the fall of a single electron. At 3:47 a.m., the field generators activated. The air vibrated not with noise, but with geometry. Monitors flickered. Quantum fluctuations rose like a tide. The bubble formed, fragile, shimmering. And then the test craft didn't accelerate. It didn't blur. It didn't glow. It simply disappeared. 100 meters across the chamber, the same craft reappeared, orientation unchanged. Internal temperature unchanged. Quantum state unchanged. Not in minutes. Not in seconds, but in something so close to instantaneous that the instruments lagged behind reality. 17 times they repeated the test that night. 17 times the universe obeyed. One engineer, trembling, pale, whispered, "We didn't break the speed of light. We stepped around it." But this revelation was not sudden. It was the climax of a story hidden behind closed doors for over a decade. NASA's secret research divisions had carried names like quantum field manipulation, zero-point geometry, and high-energy vacuum engineering. Behind those names, a small group of physicists worked in silence, chasing something most of the scientific world called impossible. They weren't looking for a new engine, they were hunting for a loophole, a weakness in the fabric of space-time itself. That loophole had always been there. Einstein showed us that space and time are not fixed. They bend, they stretch, they can be sculpted. Gravity does it. Black holes do it. The early universe did it. Space itself can expand faster than light. So why couldn't we learn to guide that expansion? Why couldn't we create a region of curved geometry where the definition of distance could be rewritten? The idea wasn't new. In 1994, physicist Miguel Alcubierre proposed the first mathematical model of such a drive. Beautiful equations, tragic energy requirements, negative mass, impossible materials. The world dismissed it. NASA missed it. The breakthrough came not from exotic matter, but from something stranger, quantum vacuum fluctuations. The empty space around you is not empty. Particles flicker in and out of existence. Energy rises and falls like waves in a storm. A chaos of creation and annihilation. If you could control that chaos, shape it, regulate it, trap it, you could generate the equivalent of negative energy densities without violating any known physical laws. And that is exactly what NASA did. The moment they stabilized a quantum vacuum pocket for more than a microsecond, the room fell silent. One physicist sat down on the floor and cried. Another laughed hysterically. A third simply repeated, "It's real, it's real, it's real." They named the system the quantum flux drive, the QFD. At its heart was a miracle of engineering, a regulator capable of adjusting space-time curvature thousands of times per second, keeping the warp bubble balanced like a perfect blade standing on its edge. Inside the bubble, physics remained normal. Outside the bubble, space-time rippled like a liquid surface pushed by invisible tides. The craft did not move through space. Space moved around the craft, and that single difference changed everything humanity thought was possible. The press conference where NASA revealed this to the world became the instant dividing line between history before and history after. Journalists expected a routine update about Mars rovers. Instead, they walked into a room where senior scientists sat with the expressions of people who had witnessed something sacred. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of advanced propulsion, stepped up to the microphone. Her voice cracked on the third word. Then she said the sentence that detonated across the world. We have created and tested a propulsion system capable of achieving effective velocities at or near the speed of light. Silence. True silence, the kind where every mind in the room collapses under the weight of a new truth. Then, we didn't break physics. We learned how to manipulate it. The announcement detonated across every corner of Earth, from university lecture halls to military think tanks to late-night conspiracy streams. But inside NASA, behind doors sealed with biometric locks, the real story continued unfolding, and it was far stranger than the polished version shown to the public. Because what the world didn't know, what almost no one outside the QFT
Check this point on the schematic.
was that the breakthrough didn't appear suddenly.
Adjusting
It
now.
grew,
Voltage
quietly,
stabilized.
dangerously,
Confirmed. We are good to go.
inside a facility situated in Nevada Desert Road. A small team of physicists had spent years working without recognition, without sunlight.
The primary grid is failing.
Without hope.
Reroute
The
power to
project
sector
had an
gamma
unofficial
now.
name whispered among the staff.
We're losing
Genesis.
stabilization on
Not
the
because they
mainframe.
believed they were creating anything, but because they understood what this technology represented. A new beginning for our species. A step into a chapter of physics that humanity was never meant to reach so soon. The first prototypes failed violently. Warp field collapsed twisted metal frames like paper. Quantum regulators overloaded, vaporizing circuitry into black dust. One experiment produced a magnetic surge strong enough to erase every hard drive in the code. Each failure carved another scar into the team's courage, but they kept going. Some out of obsession, some out of curiosity, some because they knew that if they succeeded, the universe would never be the same. One engineer described the atmosphere like this. It felt like we were trespassing on the universe's private property. The breakthrough and the price. The tipping point arrived when the team discovered a way to trap vacuum fluctuations inside a structured electromagnetic cage. It was the scientific equivalent of catching lightning in a glass bottle, except the lightning was the seething quantum storm that exists in every cubic centimeter of empty space. By adjusting the cage's harmonic resonance, they found they could generate regions of effective negative energy density, something once believed impossible outside of conventional models. Suddenly, the Alcubierre drive wasn't a fantasy. It was a blueprint, but the discovery came with a cost. 2 members of the team resigned within days. One claimed the project felt wrong, as if they were peeling back a layer of reality that shouldn't be touched. Another said he had recurring nightmares about space-time folding the wrong way.
We cannot
Still,
accept
the
these
team
terms.
pressed forward. Because
deadline
the
is tomorrow, we
mathematics
have no
were too
choice.
perfect. The implications
This is
too
completely
enormous.
unacceptable.
The dream too intoxicating. The first warp bubble. The first stable warp bubble lasted 0.9 microseconds. A blink too fast for the human eye, but long enough to prove the universe had a hidden flexibility that classical physics never accounted for. On the night they achieved a full 5-second bubble, several scientists simply collapsed from exhaustion or relief or both. A junior physicist reportedly sat in the corner whispering, "It's alive. It's alive. It's alive." Not literally, of course. Warp bubbles aren't biological, but they behave like organisms. They grow, they oscillate, they collapse. They must be fed energy in precise rhythms. A warp bubble is not a machine. It is a phenomenon part geometry, part field, part quantum storm. And the QFD learned how to keep one steady. Long enough for a craft to slip inside. Long enough to move that bubble. Long enough to change everything we believed about distance. The moment of transit. When the first physical object ever built
The
by
projections
human
are
hands
stabilizing,
crossed
but look
space
at sector
inside the
gamma.
warp bubble.
We need to
There was
reroute
no sound,
processing power
no flash,
immediately.
No drama.
Confirmed. The reroute
The
is
object
initiated.
didn't go anywhere. Space rewrote itself around the object. Inside the chamber, the craft remained at rest, perfectly stationary within its bubble. But reality outside shifted. Distances compressed, geometry folded, and the craft arrived somewhere new. Not because it traveled fast, but because the map itself changed. That distinction, subtle, counterintuitive, almost philosophical, shook the team to their core. They didn't build a faster engine, they built permission. Permission to sidestep the rules that shaped every atom, every star, every cosmic structure since the dawn of time. The scientists knew they would never look at the night sky the same way again. The stars were no longer symbols of distance, they were destinations. The ethical shock came. Even before the public announcement, NASA's internal ethics board went into crisis mode. Because manipulating space-time is not like launching a rocket. It is not a chemical reaction or a gravitational maneuver. It is a fundamental rewrite of the cosmos stage. Every warp event generates ripples, shockwaves, moving through space-time like tremors through Earth's crust. Tiny, almost immeasurable, but cumulative. What happens when thousands of ships use warp bubbles? What happens when humanity does it daily? What happens when civilizations expand using tools the universe never intended them to possess? One theoretical physicist delivered a chilling warning in a classified report. Space-time is a fabric, warp travel is a needle. We must pray the fabric is stitching. Another scientist feared something stranger, something that kept leadership awake at night. What if the universe remembers? What if repeated warping builds up like stress fractures in a material? What if space develops tension, strain, fatigue? What if the cosmos is not infinitely flexible? Nobody knew. Nobody could know. Humanity had just begun scratching the surface of a territory untouched by biology, by nature, by evolution. We stepped into a domain usually reserved for the universe itself. The psychological shift. The cultural effects were immediate and irreversible. Children began drawing warp ships instead of rockets. Artists built sculptures representing curved space-time. Philosophers wrote essays arguing that humanity had crossed from explorers into architects. Some religious leaders celebrated the discovery as humans fulfilling a divine mandate. Others condemned it as cosmic arrogance, a modern Tower of Babel. But the most haunting reaction came from the general public. For the first time in history, the stars didn't feel far away. They felt near. Touchable, reachable. Something deep inside the human psyche shifted. Loneliness, that ancient human fear of being trapped in a single world, evaporated almost overnight. Because if warp travel is possible, then so is visiting other star systems. So is finding life. So is exploring the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, we're not alone anymore. Not because someone will find us, but because we now have the means to find them. For weeks after the announcement, the world couldn't stop talking about warp travel. But inside NASA, behind radiation-shielded walls and walls, the real work was just beginning. Because revealing the quantum flux drive was one thing. Using it was another. The engineers knew that the prototype test, a small jump across the chamber, was only the first ripple of a much larger wave. The QFD bubble behaved like a living structure, sensitive to quantum noise, gravitational interference, and the smallest imperfections in curvature symmetry. Scaling it up meant stepping into a territory where the universe itself might push back. And the universe did not like being pushed. The first full-scale test ship NASA constructed the first warp-capable test vehicle in a classified dry dock. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't futuristic. It wasn't anything like the smooth silver starships of science fiction. It looked like a reinforced scientific instrument, a rigid, armored capsule wrapped in coils, sensors, and curvature stabilizers. Engineers joked that it resembled a submarine from the year 2080. But even that was flattering. It was ugly, heavy, and purpose-built. Form followed function, function followed physics. The internal cabin was small enough to make visitors claustrophobic. Only room for one operator. Cables everywhere. Vacuum-sealed panels. Temperature regulators hummed softly. The ship wasn't designed for a human. It was designed for the universe. The launch nobody remembers officially. Nothing happened on the night of the first long-distance warp test. No launch, no event, no public record. But inside the Nevada facility, at 2:14 a.m., everything changed. The test craft was lowered into a magnetic containment chamber the size of a warehouse. The QFD coils charged with a low, almost musical resonance, the kind of sound you feel more than hear, a vibration in the bones. Energy readings climbed. Curvature models stabilized. Quantum vacuum pockets aligned. Perfect knife-edge geometry. And then, the bubble formed. Not a glow, not a pulse, but a distortion, like heat bending the horizon. The craft vanished. a heartbeat, the chamber was empty. 600 meters away, sensors detected a sudden displacement, an explosion, not a shockwave, but a gentle impulse. Like reality exhaling, the craft reappeared. Same orientation, same energy state, same internal timestamp down to the nanosecond. There was no time dilation, no relativistic drift, no physical stress. For the first time in human history, an object traveled a meaningful distance without traveling. The problem they didn't expect, but something was off. Sensors detected a faint afterimage, a ghostly residual curvature echo left behind at both the departure and arrival points. Not dangerous, not destructive, but permanent. Reality had been marked. Warp travel wasn't just movement. It was a scar, a fold pressed into space-time like a fingerprint. The engineers called it geometric memory. Physicists called it residual curvature bias. One mathematician quietly called it a warning, because if every warp event leaves a mark, what happens when there are thousands? What happens when humanity uses warp travel not once a month, but once a second? Would space-time stretch? Crack? Wrinkle like overused fabric? Nobody had answers. But the questions forced NASA into emergency ethical meetings. The philosophers moved in NASA's Ethics and Integration Division. Once a tiny, underfunded office, suddenly became one of the most powerful groups in the agency. Philosophers sat beside cosmologists. Theoretical physicists debated theologians. Field engineers shared tables with metaphysics scholars. The central question wasn't technical. It was existential. Should humanity have the power to manipulate space-time? Because warp travel wasn't like fog or electricity or nuclear energy. Those affected matter. Warp travel affected reality. Every bubble was a temporary hole punched into the cosmic fabric, and a stitched seam left behind. One ethicist put it this way: we are no longer the universe, we are rewriting it. The strange visual effects. As warp experiments scaled up, unexpected phenomena began appearing around test sites. Air shimmering when no heat was present. Dust drifting in impossible patterns. Laser beams bending at microscopic angles without refracting. These were harmless at first. But one observation shook the team more than any other. Every time the warp bubble formed, extremely sensitive sensors detected a faint, repeating oscillation. A heartbeat. Not biological, not alive, but rhythmic, a stable signature in space-time that appeared every single time. It was as if the universe itself reacted to the bubble with a pulse. Was it just geometry, quantum resonance, or something deeper, something woven into the hidden structure of reality? They named the phenomenon lambda echo. No one understood it. No one could model it. It appeared and vanished too quickly. The warp bubble formed, and the universe answered. The scientific community erupts outside the classified walls. Academic chaos exploded. Dozens of competing theories emerged within days. Warp curvature weakens dark energy fields. Warp bubbles trigger microinflation pockets. Warp
Check this
travel
point
will
on the
open
schematic.
gateways to parallel brains. Warp
Adjusting
bubbles tear
now.
quantum
Voltage
coherence.
stabilized.
Warp propulsion
Confirmed.
produces
We are good to
exotic
go.
geometry harmonics. Most were wrong. Some were dangerous. A few were disturbingly plausible. Universities scrambled to rewrite entire
The primary
physics
grid is
programs.
failing.
Old
Reroute
textbooks
power
became
to sector
fossils
gamma
overnight.
now.
Students suddenly found
We're losing
themselves at the
stabilization on the
frontier of
mainframe.
science that barely existed among Earth. Everything was in motion, except the truth. The truth was still hiding inside now. The engineers understand the terrifying part. For years, they had assumed the QFD bubble protected its contents from all external forces: gravity, acceleration, space-time curvature. But new simulations revealed a chilling possibility. If a warp bubble collapses asymmetrically, the object inside is not destroyed. It is displaced. Displaced where? No model could predict. It could be pushed outside normal spacetime. It could be embedded in compressed geometry. It could fall into a state with no time dimension. Or it could simply cease to exist in any classical sense. A failed warp bubble wasn't an explosion. It was an erasure, a disappearance. The universe's version of losing a file. If humans ever stepped inside a warp ship, failure could mean vanishing into a place with no coordinates. No time, no reality. A place where existence becomes optional. The first human volunteers, despite the risks or because of them, volunteers flooded NASA's inbox. Astronauts, physicists, pilots, even ordinary civilians. Some were excited, some were desperate, some simply wanted to be part of the single greatest leap in human history. But NASA refused all of them, because before human could enter a warp bubble, one last test had to be performed. A test the engineers feared more than any other. A test that would reveal whether warp travel was just a tool.
We cannot accept these terms.
The last unmanned test.
The deadline is tomorrow. We have no choice.
The future missions.
This is
the
completely
possibility of human
unacceptable.
flight, and the fate of NASA's most dangerous invention. Because this time, the objective wasn't distance. It wasn't speed. It wasn't stability. It was time. Not time travel. Not sci-fi fantasies, but something far more subtle and far more terrifying. Would the universe allow the bubble to return without delay, or would the craft slip out of sync with the timeline? Even a difference of 1 microsecond would prove that warp travel distorted temporal geometry, that space and time could not be separated inside the bubble. A human could not survive temporal drift. A pilot could leave Earth and never arrive anywhere that still existed. And so, NASA rolled the final prototype into the chamber. No fanfare, no speeches, just a quiet understanding that this test might be the most important moment in the history of human exploration. The final test. The warp coils hummed. Temperature regulators hissed. Quantum field stabilizers pulsed. Heartbeat steady, precise, relentless. Lambda echo readings rose. Sensors
The projections
trembled.
are stabilizing, but look at sector gamma.
We need to
Inside the
reroute
control
processing
room,
power
scientists
immediately.
stared at screens
Confirmed,
with
the
expressions
reroute is
halfway
initiated.
between terror and wonder. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2. The bubble formed. Space folded. Reality relaxed. The craft disappeared into a veil of distortion. For a moment, the chamber was silent, utterly silent, as if sound itself were holding its breath. Then, a displacement wave hit the sensor. But something was wrong. The echo wasn't normal. It wasn't symmetrical. It wasn't stable. It was lingering. Longer than usual. Stronger than usual. Almost as if the universe was hesitating. And then after a delay so small only instruments could detect it, the craft reappeared. Same orientation. Same internal conditions. Same quantum state. But the timestamp was off. 47 picoseconds. A tiny difference. Microscopic, irrelevant for machines, but catastrophic for humans. Warp bubbles didn't just bend space. They bent time. And even the smallest temporal drift could compound over long distances, stretching seconds into minutes, minutes into hours, hours into centuries. Humanity could step into a warp bubble and emerge in a future where Earth no longer existed. NASA leadership froze. The engineers stared at the data in horror. But the physicists, the ones who had chased this dream with reckless curiosity, saw something else hiding inside the error. Because the timestamp wasn't just structured, patterned, intentional. As if the warp bubble hadn't returned late, but had been delayed. Delayed by something. Delayed through something. A region of curvature, a quantum boundary, a domain where space-time behaved differently. No one could agree, but one conclusion kept resurfacing. We went somewhere, not far, not long, but somewhere not described by general relativity or quantum field theory. The bubble crossed a threshold humans had never touched, and it brought back a scar in time. The moment that shattered everything during a late-night analysis session. A junior researcher noticed a faint oscillation embedded in the timestamp drift. She enhanced the waveform, filtered the noise, stabilized the sample. Then she froze, because the oscillation matched something recorded since the earliest world tests. The lambda echo, the mysterious heartbeat.
Check this point on the schematic.
Except this time,
Adjusting now.
It
Voltage
wasn't background
stabilized.
Confirmed,
noise. It
we are
wasn't
good to go.
geometry. It was encoded. The warp bubble had gone somewhere and brought back a message. Not a message from intelligence, not communication.
The
A
primary
message from
grid is
physics.
failing.
A fingerprint
Reroute
of a
power
region
to
where
sector
space-time
gamma
is
now.
thinner, smoother, sharper.
We're
where
losing
geometry
stabilization
flows
on the
instead of sitting
mainframe.
Still. Something not part of the universe. A boundary, a membrane, a structure. A place where distance and time don't make numbers. For the first time, the team realized the truth. Warp travel wasn't just a tool. It was a doorway. And that doorway led to a place the universe had kept hidden since the first moment of creation. The silence before the storm. NASA locked down every scrap of data. Reports rewritten, classified, archived in vaults beneath Langley and Houston. The official statement to the public was simple: the warp system is stable. Further tests are planned, but inside the agency, chaos erupted. Some scientists wanted to stop everything. Destroy the QFD, seal away Genesis forever. Others wanted to accelerate, push the boundary, send probes into the region beyond the Echo, into the place where time hesitated. One senior physicist, exhausted, hollow-eyed, said it best: "We didn't build a warp drum. We built the first scalpel sharp enough to cut open the decision." In an emergency meeting, NASA made the most important choice in modern history. They would send one final probe, a long-distance test, a jump not of meters but of light years, not to explore, not to discover, but to answer one question: does the warp bubble touch another layer of reality, or is it merely brushing the boundaries of our own? If the Lambda Echo strengthens during a long-distance jump, the implications would be staggering. There may be corridors of spacetime. There may be deeper structures beneath the universe. There may be physics we were never
We
meant to
cannot
see.
accept these
Warp
terms.
travel might not be movement.
The deadline
but
is
transition.
tomorrow. We have no
The probe
choice.
was prepared. The field
This is
tuned.
completely
The
unacceptable.
coordinates locked. The launch sequence began. The final reveal. The warp bubble blossomed into existence, smooth, powerful, stable. Space bent. Time hesitated. The probe vanished into the ripple. For 7 seconds, the instruments screamed with data, and then everything went silent. The probe did not reappear in the expected location, or the backup location, or anywhere within the solar system. NASA checked every gravitational sensor on Earth. Nothing. They checked deep space telescopes. Nothing. They checked the Lambda Echo. And that's when they saw it. Not faint, not subtle, but thunderous. A resonance pattern so strong it nearly overloaded the detectors. Not random, not chaotic. Structured, ordered, repeating. A pattern that did not match any known physical process in the universe. A pattern that looked like an alien. Not from alien life. Not from intelligence. Not from consciousness. But from the architecture of the universe itself. As if reality were responding, acknowledging, reacting.
The projections
to
are
the fact
stabilizing,
that
but look
humanity
at sector
had finally
gamma.
discovered how
We
to
need to
knock on
reroute
its deeper
processing
layers.
power
The
immediately.
stars were never far.
Confirmed, the
The
reroute is
distance was
initiated.
never the barrier. The barrier was understanding. And now, for the first time in human history, the universe is looking back.